Greetings and salutations, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Spinistry Chat. I am your host, Kevin Lee. And this edition, we're following up, as promised, on our bikepacking survey and digging a little bit deeper into the individual responses and some of the feedback we got along those lines. And the idea is to take some of that feedback and expand on it, on what we can do, what we can't do, what we might do in the future based on that feedback. We'll start off with just a quick overview of the general survey, just a couple of questions, and the general feedback on those as a reminder, or for those who didn't hear our earlier episode. This is going to be getting pretty deep, pretty dry. So if you're not interested in bikepacking, if you're not interested in learning how to bikepack, if you're not interested in what Spinistry offers for those who are wanting to go bikepacking, you probably want to bail out of this one right now. If bikepacking's on your to-do list, on your desires list, if you want more of it in your life, and there's any way we can help you, definitely climb aboard and go for the ride with us here, and let's see what we can do to bring more adventure into your lives. The general questions: how likely are you to go bikepacking between now and the end of the year? Ridiculously high amount, and this is a big swing from when we've done similar surveys in the past. Roughly 83% of the respondents are likely to go bikepacking before the end of the year. That's a huge chunk. It used to be, it was like 25, 30, 35% of the people were likely or interested. There were a lot of people that were just liking the idea of bikepacking but not following up on it. So fantastic to see more people are actually getting active on the bikepacking side of things. Which months of the year are you most likely to go bikepacking? You could choose all that apply, and this is a very Texas-centric group. So basically the summer and the winter are out of the mix. January was pretty low, and I think August was almost as low. October by far was the most popular month, and hey, we've got stuff going in October for sure. November was close behind, and September was pretty strong too. That might get a little iffy in Texas. It can still be warm in September, but we're going to be playing with some ideas. April and May were both very strong. Obviously, we're pushing those through, but we do have some June stuff in the works for clinics and get-togethers and things like that that you might want to keep an eye out for. How many nights do you prefer to camp overnight when you are bikepacking? Most people said 2 nights. Not really a big surprise there. What may have been a little surprising, fewer people than I expected that were just looking for 1 night of camping. So that's that's a full weekend of camping there. It's pretty cool. How many hours of riding do you try for on bikepacking trips? Looks like the vast majority of people were in the 6 to 8 hours a day of pedaling. And then we had the open question: how could we be most helpful for your bikepacking adventures? And the reason I'm digging down into this one a little deeper and going into detail on it here, it's obvious from the feedback that we got there. There's a lot of people that aren't up to speed with what we do as Spinistry, what we have available. So we want to do a better job of communicating how we can help with this stuff, how we do help with this stuff already, and what we're going to do more of. So if any of these responses are yours, thank you very much. If any of this, I don't want any of this to come across as negative. I don't want any of it to come across as dismissive. Some things are just outside of what we're able to do, or some of it's, quite frankly, outside of what we want to do. But I do think it's fair when people give these types of responses that we give our explanation of what we're able to bring to the table, and if it doesn't line up with what people are looking for, I just want to, when it's appropriate, explain why. But also, if there's some good feedback here that we're not doing or haven't done in the past, I also want to illuminate, hey, thanks for that suggestion. Here's ways we might want to go. But a lot of this is going to be, hey, that might be a direction we want to head. We're not sure how to do that yet. Help us come up with a plan. And I'm going to go through these one at a time, and I'll probably edit some of them later after the fact, but there might be some overlap between the questions or the responses. The response was, it's something I want to try, so planned route and camp support would be helpful. Short answer, we basically already offer that from time to time. It's not something that's always available, but we do put together regular outings that are semi-supported, point-to-point bikepacking, getaway weekend type things. The one thing I want to really touch on and illuminate at the very front end of this conversation, though, is bikepacking itself. That's a very self-sufficient activity. It's a very self-supported activity. And that's what we're here to help people get comfortable with that environment. You're always going to be stretching your comfort zone in these types of experiences. A common thread that is in some of these responses are people are looking for very, what they think are very specific needs for them to have a good bikepacking experience. It needs to be in this spot. It needs to be on these days. It needs to be these number of miles. It needs to have this level of support available. I mean, we've been doing these types of trips for several years now, a number of years now. And the reality is everybody's ideal trip is going to be different from everyone else's. People need to be a little more flexible and, hey, I want to do this as a general type of experience, but if this trip's available or this outing's available or this weekend's available and it doesn't line up with what my ideal is, it's probably still a good adventure and a good time. So all I'm saying is be a little flexible and you're going to have a lot more fun. Planned route and camp support would be helpful. On the most basic level, we almost always have that available. We always have planned routes. We have planned overnights. We give various levels of support. We'll touch on that. But again, this is for bikepacking. The expectation generally is people are going to be self-supported, self-sufficient. We'll point you to where resupply might be. If it's a long distance between resupply points, we may, hang out as a mobile aid station or something like that. But plan on being self-sufficient. Learn how to be self-sufficient. But we'll give you tips on how to do that along the way. Next response. Provide routes and points of interest with GPX download for solo and events around the big state of Texas. So there is a social element to it. Think we have that covered. Share routes, camping spots, gear. That's something we, as Club Ministry members, everyone's already has access to. We have over 1,700 routes. We regularly talk about the different camping spots that are available if people want to go out and do trips of their own. If you are a Club Ministry member, we do have gear available for checkout as well. Organize routes and stops. Let us know if 100% unsupported. Definitely we organize routes and stops. And if it's an event that we're offering support, we're definitely going to explain what that level of support is. And not just from our events or our get-togethers or our routes or anything like that. If you're looking at bikepacking type stuff, I highly recommend you always assume, for lack of a better term, the worst. The worst case scenario is it's 100% unsupported. Always be prepared for that unless it's very, spelled out very specifically differently from that. And that way you're always properly prepared if the details are fuzzy. Definitely seek clarification. Never assume that, hey, this is a Spinistry event and we went to a Spinistry event 3 years ago and it worked this way, so all of them worked that. Quite frankly, every single Spinistry gathering event that we do is different from one another. So never make assumptions along those lines. If anything's not clear, don't hesitate to reach out, ask for clarification. If you have that question, most likely other people do too. If we didn't do a good job of communicating it, that gives us the kick in the rear end to get that information updated better. Lead vehicle support for safety, mechanicals, and scouting along the route. I'm going to say, generally speaking, that's going to be an unrealistic expectation, at least from a Spinistry perspective. Particularly our bikepacking events, the idea is most of those are going to be free is the intent. If not free, extremely low cost for club's ministry members. And we'll go into more details on how we're hoping that works as each individual get together and event comes up in the coming weeks and months. But lead vehicle support's not a realistic expectation for a bikepacking trip, I think is the best way to explain it. Now, that said, we may have trips where we do offer that level of support, but that's probably going to be, a higher end weekend. That won't fall into the free weekends, but we don't have specific plans for anything like that right now, so I can't outline what those differences might be. Again, just plan on taking care of yourself. If we provide a route, we'll explain, hey, this was last scouted XYZ, or if we're out there doing semi-support and things are questionable, we'll figure out ways to communicate. All right, so here's one of the general responses that kind of goes into a little bit of detail. Let's talk about, so the response is, it's on my list of things to try. So an overnighter with a decent ride, greater than 4 hours both days sounds good. I need to accumulate some gear. I have a carbon cyclocross/gravel bike and an aluminum hardtail to choose from. That's not outside the ordinary right there. That's a pretty solid base of where a lot of people start to get into these bikepacking type of adventures. And for this person and other people like it, I would say, you don't have to wait on everything. You don't have to wait for the stars to align. You don't have to wait for the perfect event to start doing it and getting into it and things like that. An example along those lines, you have to accumulate gear. Fantastic. There's nothing wrong with that. You don't have to have everything before you start experiencing overnight weekends. A recommendation along those lines would be, you don't have all the bikepacking gear, that can get expensive. I get that completely. But most of us have probably in the garage or the closet, we probably have old, just regular camping gear stowed away somewhere, or we have somebody we can borrow some from. Or worst case scenario, between Walmart and Amazon, you can probably get enough to get through a trial weekend for $100 to $150. Worst case scenario, probably less than that, quite frankly. And what you can do in that case is go ahead and get familiar with the camping aspect of it. If you don't have a lot of camping experience, from the way I look at things, that's really obviously you have to know how to ride the bike. That's important. But from the bikepacking perspective, what a lot of people kind of hold back from, it's like, I don't have all the equipment to do that, so I can't do that yet. Well, you can't accumulate all the right equipment until you start doing it. It's almost a chicken and egg sort of situation there. I always recommend overnight wherever you can, whenever you can. You don't have to necessarily do a multi-day point-to-point adventure. You can go to a state park, get a camp spot, set up camp for the weekend. Don't worry about tearing it down and packing it up. Or just have your camp set up. Camp on Friday night. Get up in the morning, figure out what a morning after sleeping in a tent's like, hop on your bike and go for a bike ride in or around or near the state park, come back later in the day and do some more camping. You make a weekend of it and you find the things about camping that you really, really like. You're going to find things about camping that you really, really don't like. You're going to find things about your camping setup that, well, this kind of sucked, but it'd be a lot better if it worked this way or did that. And that way you're able to start narrowing down the equipment that is right for you, because everybody's different. Everybody has different things that they're comfortable with, uncomfortable with, or quite just downright miserable with it. Well, that's a deal breaker. I'm never doing it that way ever again. You want to find those things before you make the big investment. And I'll be honest with you, I was surprised how many people responded to this survey that they were looking for routes. I know I need to do a better job of sharing that information. We can do routes. We do custom routes. If we don't have a route that lines up with exactly what you're looking for in your club's ministry member, give us some criteria and we'll put together a potential route for you to review and see if it might line up with what you're looking for. Routes that show camping, water, and food areas. Do that all the time. Organize groups and events. We do that all the time. Come up with some tried and true routes. Starting to sound like a broken record. Here's a rather generic beginner, so would need tips. Definitely, we're going to be doing some very beginner-centric bikepacking clinics, bikepacking get-togethers, and we'll be doing a lot of bikepacking content covering the basics. For example, it's probably not a realistic expectation for us to do a bikepacking clinic that shows everyone how to build a fire, how to dig a cat hole and use a cat hole, how to do whatever. But those are things we can put together podcasts or YouTube videos or something like that. And so for some of that really basic stuff, and if somebody's truly brand new and truly a beginner, because beginner is a very fluid definition. One person's perception of them being a beginner is totally different from another person's perception of being a beginner. So it's not appropriate for us to go, oh, you're a beginner. Here's all the things you need to learn from us, because quite frankly, we could probably learn some stuff from you as well. I still haven't figured out how to pack the bike, tent, bag, pad, food, water. Then I'll try one of the routes near Austin. Going back to what I was saying earlier, don't put off getting familiar with doing stuff because you don't have all the answers yet. You don't have all the answers, so you know which questions actually need to be asked. When you're starting out with these endeavors, you don't know what you don't know yet. And the only way you find out what you don't know is to run into the situations. And we just try to give you enough of a security blanket, enough almost like training wheels, for lack of a better term, where you know you're going to have probably more like a bowling alley with bumpers. You know you're going to be able to get down the lane and get to where you want to at the end of the lane and have enough security that you don't have to worry about going too far off track. I like the trips I've seen planned, and the plan looks interesting. As I am new to bikepacking, I'm a bit intimidated to join the trips sometimes. Maybe a bikepacking one-on-one clinic would be helpful. What gear is needed, safety ideas for route planning, etc. Fantastic feedback, and we're taking you up on that very specifically. We're going to be doing some very basic bikepacking clinics, and we'll be doing some trips that will have a beginner focused component to them as well. But I want to reinforce early in the process that beginner focused component is not going to be hand holding, spoon feeding, wipe your nose type level of service. The expectation is you're still going to do things yourself, but we're going to give you an organized framework on how you can do them. And you're still going to have to be self-sufficient. It's not a realistic expectation that, if you have a flat tire 5 miles down the road, that we're going to come fix your tire for you. There's just some basic levels of fitness, bike mechanic ability, riding ability, experience, things like that. You have to be at a basic level before you even consider start doing these trips. So, if you're not able to pedal a bike for 2 to 3 hours at a time, in my opinion, you really shouldn't be at least looking at Spinistry trips, to be quite frank. It's not that we're against people that need to build that level of fitness. It's just we're not able to cover all levels of the spectrum. So if you're at that level of fitness, work on your fitness before you really need to start looking at the trips. If you don't know how to change a tire yet, quite frankly, you shouldn't be doing adventure group rides anyway. You need to have that basic level of knowledge and ability before you're out there holding up everyone else's ride. It's that simple. Offer an intro to prior. Okay. Gear lists and where to buy or how to make info. there's a there is a whole World Wide Web internet thing out there that has a gazillion pages on stuff like that. Lists upon lists upon lists, affiliate links all over the place. What works for me does not necessarily work for anyone else, and vice versa. We're happy to say, hey, this is a really cool product and we like it a lot ourselves. But just because we say that, doesn't mean it's the right one for you. And how I pack my bike is not going to align with how anyone else packs their bike. So everybody does it a little bit differently. My one big piece of advice along those lines, just because there's somebody you believe in, that you like their content, their information they put out, don't be married to their approach to things, particularly if you're looking at YouTube and social media stuff and things like that. A lot of the times, there's a lot of those people that are sponsored or brand ambassadors and things like that aren't making it crystal clear. So there's a lot of times they'll be actively promoting very specific pieces of equipment and things like that. And they may not even really use it for themselves, but it's part of the sponsorship deal that they have. So don't get hung up on specific pieces of equipment and specific ways people organize things. You just want to know the generalities. It's like, if you're going to, do you plan to cook while you're bike packing? Not everybody does. I'm one of those. I rarely cook. There'll be many trips I don't even pack a stove of any kind because I know there's going to be enough stores along the way that I can just grab whatever food I want to. Or even if I know there aren't going to be stores, I will just stow food that I don't have to prepare or anything. I just unwrap them, eat them, and I'm done. But some people want to, the cooking experience and the meal prep's a big part of the equation for them. So that person's going to have a totally different pack out than what I'm going to have. Lots of people focus on, water supply as far as, I'm going to have a water filter and a backup water filter and things like that. Quite frankly, if I'm bikepacking in Texas, there isn't a source of water that I would even rely on with a filter, quite frankly. I'm going to figure out ways to carry all the water that I need. And we've got some tips along those lines that can be helpful. You can have the capacity for water, but not necessarily have to carry it the whole time. Like one of the setups on one of my bikes, I have a big anything cage under the down tube that'll hold a 2-liter bottle. And when I go out on an extended trip, I will put that 2-liter bottle empty in that anything cage. And then the last store or water faucet or spigot or church or whatever before my overnight spot, I'll fill the water bottle at that time for my water that I need at camp that night, sort of thing. And that way I'm not carrying that 2 liters of water all day, but I do have the capacity all day. Maybe provide plan, route, where to stay. We do that. More routes. More routes in areas with fewer gravel roads or public land. I'm not sure how to read that one. If you want fewer gravel roads, does that mean you want more single track? Do you want less public land or do you want more public land? I'll address kind of both in a way. If you're going on a spin history trip, 90% plus chance that, our motto is long, hard, and dirty. So you're probably not going to have fewer gravel roads unless there's some single track involved. But in Texas, there's not a lot of single track options that make sense for bike packing. So if you're looking for pavement, we're probably not a good source for that. And this is Texas where we do most of our rides and events. So there's very little public land to work with here to begin with. And when we do go to other states, Colorado, New Mexico, for example, we are definitely going to be taking advantage of all the public land access we possibly can. Good stopping place for food or beer. We usually highlight those, and we'll usually set up a gathering spot if there's something convenient like that. Love to do something that leaves from Dallas, does a long ride to a campsite, does an overnight camp, then rides back the next day. That would be amazing with the crew. We definitely have done those trips in the past. That kind of lines up with what I was talking about a little bit earlier. Very often when we put these sorts of trips and group outings together, this is the weekend that we're doing it. If that doesn't line up with your weekend, sorry, that's the weekend. And if we're going 50 miles a day and you're wanting to go 45 miles a day, or if we're going 50 miles a day and you're wanting to go 55 miles a day, maybe throw a little bit of wiggle room in there, sort of thing. If we're starting from Denton instead of Dallas proper, hey, maybe throw a little bit of wiggle room in there, sort of thing. The reality is bikepacking, even though the popularity seems to be going the right direction, it's never going to be a huge group. This is a niche within a niche within a niche. It's a very specialized form of adventure and recreation. So it's never going to be a situation where there's 5,000 people in a metro area that are available any given weekend to get together and do a trip. So if you can find a trip that has half a dozen people interested in it, that's going to be a pretty big crew on a week-to-week basis. Put together a special event every once in a while that gets 20 or 30 people. That's something special. And every once in a while might be able to put pieces together for something that goes into the hundreds. But that takes a lot of flexibility from a lot of people, where it's not going to be exactly what everyone's looking for, but they get that the community and the social aspect of it is the real special part of that one. The level of support at Terlingo event in 2022 was amazing. The food, transportation, transporting some gear, all made the trip much more fun. And that's going to be a one-off trips like that. We do plan to do it again this year. Hope to have the details for Spinistry Palooza out in June for a November date. But the reality is, once you start throwing support into the mix, there's only so many people we can support directly. For bigger groups to get together, it's almost always going to have to be primarily self-supported with coordinated overnight spots, sort of thing. And with, here's where you can stop along the way between the overnight spots. When we do the supported trips, they are going to be smaller, more intimate groups, sort of thing. And generally speaking, they're really going to probably cater still towards more advanced people, where it's a support for people to be able to go a longer distance, as opposed to a support for people to learn from scratch. Again, from my perspective, what makes the most sense for the beginners and people that are new to it is to work from a base camp sort of operation, where your camping is one spot and you spend the weekend in that spot, and then you go out on bicycle rides of whatever distance each day. And that would be the basic level, the beginner level. And then, maybe the next level is you start, you do start carrying gear, and maybe you Friday night set up camp one spot and camp overnight, tear down, review things. And then for your bikepacking 101, just getting started with stuff, it's more about let's load that bike up and then just pedal a little ways down the road and set up another camp the next night, sort of thing. There's a progression in there. A guided bikepacking trip, probably going to be outside of what we ever do, would be my guess. The reality is, once you start getting to guided tours and things like that. It's just outside of the way we structure our pricing to do things. A true guided tour sort of situation, I mean, that's not going to happen free for a club member. It's not going to happen for a couple $100 for, a multi-day adventure. That's something you're probably getting into the $1,500 to $3,000 to $4,000 per person range. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's just not the type of stuff that we do. So a true guided trip is something a little bit different. And if it's something you're looking for and you're comfortable with that sort of price range that I mentioned there, fantastic. That makes a lot of sense for a lot of people. There's also a lot of people that they want that guided bikepacking trip, but they want it for $100 for a 5-day trip or something. That's not a realistic expectation. If you're looking for guided bikepacking trips and you're kind of flexible on where you do those, and it's more about the experience of the guide themselves and what they bring to the table, definitely feel free to reach out to me. I can point you in the direction of a few people that are really good at that sort of thing, that might be a little bit different than what everybody else is seeing, sort of thing, if you're looking for something special. But I don't see us going down that road, but never say never, but it's not on my plan at the moment. Firewood and beer. Those are near the top of my list for what I'm looking for at an overnight spot as well. Can't say we can always provide that directly ourselves, but we can point you in the right direction most of the time if it's available. And who knows, every once in a while, we may have a Spinistry cooler in the back of the truck. Having organized trips would be awesome. I'm intimidated by it because I'm not experienced with it yet. Please don't be intimidated. Please don't. That's really a big part of why we're chatting right now. The biggest piece of advice I can give is just do it. Just go out there and do it. And don't have a preconceived notion of, well, this is what a trip has to look like to be a successful trip. Anything that's progression is a successful trip. Again, going back to the basics, if your fitness level is high enough to spend most of the day on the bike, you want to be there. If your mechanical ability level is basic enough to repair a flat, fix a broken chain, or ideally set up single speed if you need to, just enough to limp it on down, you really want to be there before you start doing these sorts of adventures. And you want to be experienced enough on the bicycle that wherever you're riding, if it's mountain bike trail, that you're comfortable enough on a mountain bike trail that, if you're 20 miles out in the middle of nowhere, that's not going to be the end of the world. Same, if you're on gravel roads and you're 15 miles away from any form of civilization and don't even have cell phone coverage at the moment anyway, if stuff like that freaks you out, you may not be ready for this yet. But if you're okay with, I'm out of cell phone coverage now, but I know sometime in the next hour I'll have it again. That's kind of that basic level of comfort you want to be at with the outdoors at that point. I know it's not for everyone, but I enjoy water and electricity. Generally speaking, I'm a fan of those myself. Whenever possible, quite frankly, I do try to arrange an overnight with both water and electricity. I like to be able to recharge my equipment. And as I stated earlier, I prefer having access to a fresh source of water. But if we set up things that those aren't available, it will be crystal clear. But that's also going to be one of those things that will probably provide that level of support when we do a semi-supported event or ride, where if the overnight is in the middle of nowhere and there's no water or electricity, well, we'll have plenty of water in the truck for everybody to reload, and we'll usually have charging accommodations of some sort, battery banks, generator, whatever else. Here's the thing, I'm very interested in the riding part of bikepacking and almost not at all interested in the part where my gear has to go on the bike and mess with the bike experience. I could do almost every bikepacking event with you I enjoyed Spinistry Palooza tremendously, but I want to ride my bike, not carry my stuff on the bike. The support I am looking for is limited. Can you carry my sleeping bag and tent bundle for me? And blah, blah, blah. Spinistry Palooza was perfect. And for those that aren't familiar with Spinistry Palooza and some of the other trips we've done, there are times we do offer kind of that level support for point-to-point events where we'll carry folks' gear from overnight spot to overnight spot so they don't have to worry about carrying the tent and everything else like that, so they can travel later. But we don't always offer that level of support. So again, just because we've done it for one event doesn't mean it's there for another event. Don't sign up for one going, well, they did that at Spinistry Palooza. I'm sure they'll do it. Double check, make sure that is a level of support that is available. And yes, this is something we do want to do on a fairly regular basis and do more of these. But the logistics of it aren't simple, for lack of a better term. I think you are already helpful for routes and venues. I did the one out of Hillsborough a few years ago and had a great time. I think that is an excellent example. That is an excellent example. We definitely want to do more like that. That one was a little bit different in that we were combining a bikepacking get-together, overnight get-together with one of our traditional events. So the Bikepacker started out. And we also had Jan Bennett's help with that one, where she was leading the bike packing group, and that's where we're getting into the realm of that's a fantastic way to do things, but it's not a realistic logistical expectation for me to ride my bike and support people as a true guide, but then also shuttle people's gear with this. I can't do both sort of thing. But in turn, if we're doing it as a free benefit for Club Spinistry members, it's not a realistic expectation for us to tap somebody on the shoulder and, hey, can you be a bike packing guide for this weekend? Because somebody that does something like that deserves compensation. Not that we don't want to pay people to do it or figure out ways to do it. There's not a big pool of talent to choose from for things like that, and there's not a big pool of talent available, sort of thing. So it's, I don't know that there's going to be very many people that are able to make a living guiding bikepacking tours in Texas, for example. You might be able to get away with it in parts of Colorado or New Mexico or other very outdoor-centric areas. It would be a tough way to make a living in Texas, I would think. Now, don't get me wrong. If that's where I wanted to focus, I could probably figure out a way to do it. And I would love to be able to do it from time to time. And I may do it from time to time. Haven't figured out how to make that work yet. If somebody else wants to reach out to me and see how we might be able to collaborate on it, I'm all ears. I'm open to suggestion. Let's see. Open to more group events. Having a good group with a ride of around 30 miles each way. This one's a good example of what I was talking about earlier about you may have to expand your comfort zones. And definitely from our survey data, the reality is most of the people that are interested in bikepacking are going to be interested more than 30 miles each way, is quite frankly the way. So is there the possibility of doing that base camp situation like I was talking about, where you set up camp here and we can give you a 30-mile loop to do each day while other people are doing a 50 or 100-mile loop? Yes, that makes all the sense in the world. But to set up a point-to-point route of 30 miles and then another point-to-point route of 40 miles and then another point-to-point route to accommodate all the different people that want to go different distances, it's not a realistic expectation, I don't think. And I'm not trying to sound dismissive, and I'm not trying to sound like I'm ignoring a request. But if you're at one end of the demand curve, you probably need to nudge up more towards the bigger part of the bell. Provide any updates to the weather forecasts and also road conditions. Not sure what that means. Again, weather forecasts. I mean, everybody has generally access to the same information. I get my weather data from the internet, various tools for anywhere that I need to look for it. So, I mean, everyone's going to have access to the same stuff. And road conditions, I mean, I don't know what that means specifically. Road conditions change from day to day. It's not a realistic expectation for us or anyone, unless they live on that road or travel that same road every day themselves, to know what any specific road conditions may be at any given time. I mean, we'll generally know, hey, this route is primarily a rock-based road, so it usually takes, rain pretty well. But even when we know it does take rain pretty well, there can be spots on it that don't take it as well as others, or there's, a levee breaks and washes out the road. I've seen that happen before. Or we've also seen it before where what was a rock road, the county's redoing and they pulled up all the rock and it's just a dirt road at the moment because they're going to put new rock down, but rain comes through and it's a mud road that day. Safe routes, that's something we definitely try to focus on. That's probably near the top of our priorities of what we shoot for. But safe is a very relative term. So without knowing exactly how you might define safe, I'm not going to put a guarantee. Oh yeah, we've got the safest routes ever. We do focus on what our own perceptions of safety generally are, but going back to like Spinistry Palooza and the routes around Terlingua, some of those are rugged and remote. So our definition of safe in those cases are we have a pretty well marked route. We know when people are supposed to be going through certain areas. But it's remote and rugged areas. So if something happens, you're going to need a satellite tracker to hit that SOS button. Then they may have to bring a helicopter in to come get you. It might be the only way to get you out. Some people may not consider that safe, but in turn, you're not going to see a single car that day. So from my perspective, that day definitely takes the safety factor up. Route planning with camping spots, definitely have that covered. Beginner trips, we're definitely working on that. Newbie, not even sure what to ask. I get that. And ask everything. Don't be afraid to ask questions, because if you have that question, other people do too. The biggest thing I can recommend is just show up whenever you can to a group clinic, get together event. That's definitely, if it's supposed to be beginner focused or have a beginner focused component to it, you definitely want to do those or send in your questions like this, make responses on the surveys. The more specific, the better, definitely help. But again, going back to what we were talking about earlier, new people don't know what they don't know yet. The best way to start finding out those things is to get involved and interact, and not necessarily go out on an advanced level multi-day trip and learn the hard way, sink or swim. That's not what I'm saying there. Just spend time around people when it makes sense. Have no idea on what we're doing. We'll have lots of questions on gear and stuff. We're definitely going to be doing some bike packing clinics, even this weekend. I'll have this up by Friday. So most people will hear this after it. But as an example, a couple days from now on Saturday, we're doing a Rat 1000 meet and greet at Mad Duck Cyclery in Grapevine. The focus is to field questions about the Rat and people that are interested in doing that. But it's just a meet and greet. It's a get together. People are bringing their bikes with their setup. I mean, that's a fantastic environment for newer people to come out and interact with people, ask questions, see what other people are talking about, get some ideas themselves. So we're doing that one at Mad Duck in Grapevine, but have plans to be in the Houston area July 8th weekend. Nothing specific. We just know we're going to be in the area that weekend already, so I'm trying to put something together there. And we're going to put together other clinics like that throughout the summer. So just follow our social media and our emails, and come join us when you can. Thanks for joining us, and we will have more ministry chats soon, and definitely a lot of in-person get-togethers.